Success in farming is all about precision and efficiency, ensuring every seed, every drop of water, every nutrient and treatment counts. Terplex Ag is helping farmers all over Iowa and the Midwest do just that. With precision ag drone technology and support from Terplex, you'll boost your productivity and make timely and informed decisions, all while reducing your costs and increasing your profit. It's time to revolutionize your farming. Harvest the benefits with Terplex Ag. Visit TerplexAg.com.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode, our second episode of our new summer series here at Cyclone Fanatic, courtesy of our friends, the Ivy College of Business. If you didn't listen to the first episode, I recommend you go back. C-Dub and I talked about how CF was born. And if that kind of sets you up for the theme of the podcast, is we really want to dive into, the sports business side of things, what is going on outside of our day-to-day news. And today, Brent Blum, we've never done a podcast together.
I know. I'm honored.
I know. I'm excited to have you.
It's a lot easier working with you than Williams.
Yeah, I bet.
You've probably heard that before.
I've been told.
Yes. But no, great to be here and excited. I two things.
Okay.
I love the summer series, but I also love the Ivy College of Business.
Of course.
Because I worked there for 6 years before getting into this whole NIL world. So great people there. I'm actually going to go see Dean Spalding here in a couple weeks.
Nice.
Congratulate him on his upcoming retirement, and can't say enough good things about Ivy. And I love this idea.
I know. Chris was saying his biggest recommendation to people is that they go get a business degree. And I actually was thinking about it after, and I was like, I always tell myself if I could go back, I would get a degree. I would get a marketing degree.
And there's still time, because you can get right. You can get a grad degree and not just an MBA, but they do some, you get an advanced marketing degree, finance, accounting, and and entrepreneurship too, which huge in entrepreneurship at Ivy. Let me tell you.
Yeah, no, there's always time for education.
Absolutely.
So for today, obviously NIL has continuously been at the forefront of conversation in college athletics since it started. What was it, 2 years ago? Is it 2 years now?
Let's see, July 1 of almost 3 years.
That's
2021,
crazy.
July 1, 2021 was D-Day for NIL.
That's actually insane. It doesn't feel it's been that long, but obviously with the news that came out last week with the lawsuit that's been going on, go back and listen to C-Dub and Bloom Pod. They put out on Friday. They dive a lot into the details of what all of that looks like for Iowa State. I really want to dive into the other side of NIL. Specifically, WeWill. What the heck is going on in there? How did we get here?
Yep.
You've been obviously running the show. Crystal Bloom is now also part of the team with events and marketing side of things. So I really want to pick your brain about that, just so that as Iowa State fans, people can really get to know more of what's going on inside your collective. Because like I said, C-Dub and Bloom did a really good job. You guys really broke down a lot of the details of the case and kind of what that means for Iowa State. But I want you to go back to when you were approached to take this job.
Yeah, it's crazy because I was, I've told a little bit about this on the podcast, but I was really comfortable. I loved my time at the foundation in the Ivy College of Business. So a lot of people didn't know, but that was my full-time job. So the podcast and then helping out on TV and radio was a hobby, and that's what I went to school for. But the paycheck and the benefits came from the foundation, and had a great time there. So I was not exactly looking around, but you could kind of see the tea leaves start to happen. So I'll just kind of give you the genesis of how the collective came about. So everything changed July 1, 2021. That was when the NCAA basically threw its hands up and said, okay, you want NIL, go for it. And at first, particularly here in the state of Iowa, there wasn't a whole lot. I think the first fall, Iowa State had less than 10 athletes actually have any type of NIL deal. And so that was the year with Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, and those guys had T-shirts through Fanatic and Marts, and then also some with Raygun. And then you saw Breece Hall doing some cameos and things for like $20 a pop, and I think they had an autograph signing. So I would say it was super unsophisticated. but always leave it to the big money in the SEC to figure out, well, wait a second, instead of having all of these one-off NIL deals with t-shirts and autographs and cameos, and then some start to get into the cars and things like that. What if we pool all of our resources and then have one entity, a collective, collect that and distribute it out? And so that's where collectives came to be. Really started in the SEC, and schools like Tennessee and Florida and Georgia raised a lot of money really quickly. And that first off season of NIL is when football programs and basketball programs started to realize, if we don't do this, we are literally going to be poached by the biggest schools. And so Iowa State was a little bit slowish to get going. There were two different groups that came together. One was on the football side, one was on the men's basketball side. And both coaching staffs are approached a couple of business folks here in Ankeny and said, hey, if we don't do something, we are going to get left behind. And I think at first Iowa State's like, yeah, but really, how does it really change Iowa State's place in all this? And then the Tyrese Hunter thing happened.
Yeah.
And that was the wake-up call for everybody, where it went from a concept of we should start looking to this like, oh my gosh, we better do this now or else it's going to get real bad real quickly. And so a couple of great folks started the collective. It was Ryan Harklaw, former football player, Jason Luch, who also owns Cyclone Fanatic, Josh Rank, former football player, great guy, works for Principal. And then Dan McCarney and George Niang were on the original board as well. And so I was not involved right away. I was just working in the College of Business, but obviously had an interest in Iowa State doing well. And then what happened on the collective side is they got up and running through a consulting firm that launched them into a nonprofit 501c3. So they hired a company that made them a 501c3, and they raised that first month. Their first month of operation was May of 2022. So Iowa State was probably 5 months behind most schools, but ahead of others. And they raised a bunch of money that first month. And they said, "Oh my gosh, this is pretty easy." They raised about $60,000 the first month the collective exists. And everyone thought at that time, well, if we're doing $60,000 a month, we're going to be fine. And, it'd be more than all right. And then by the time July rolled around, it was down to $3,000. And I think everybody on the WeWill team realized, oh, wow, this is probably a full-time job for somebody because it's going to take a while to build out the operation. People aren't, as much as we love it, and we think people are all like us that are crazy, people aren't just going to willingly just donate tens of thousands of dollars without work.
Right.
And I think that's what some of these collectives are finding out is it takes, I'm not calling myself a professional, but full-time people, there's a process to fundraising, and it's not just here, give me your money. There's work that has to be done. So long story short, they approached me that summer and said, hey, would you be interested? And at first I'm like, I don't know. I mean, a pretty good gig here at the College of Business. Settled. I had two young guys, and it's like, I like my benefits, all these things. But then I really thought, outside of my family, my wife, and my kids, there's nothing I love more than Iowa State.
Yeah.
And so I had a really good conversation actually with Dean Spalding in the College of Business. I was like, hey, Dean, I don't want to leave, but also I'm worried if somebody doesn't take this on, what will happen to Iowa State athletics and their hierarchy? We've done so many good things here recently with Campbell, and then Altsberger had it going a little bit, just made a Sweet 16. Somebody needs to do something. So I took a leap of faith. There were a group of folks, just to be honest with people, I didn't take any money from the collective to start. We had a group of folks that basically fronted a runway for me for a couple of years that were Iowa State boosters. So my wife, more than anything, was comfortable with me taking this on.
Yeah.
And then it gave us a little leeway to say, okay, even if this whole thing goes away, you'll at least have something that you can fall back on here, which was helpful. And then when I started, it was August 1st, 2022. And it was like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And at that point, we were fairly significantly behind. We had my first day on the job. I got a call that Will McDonald had some monster offers to leave Iowa State right before the season. So it was like, okay, you need to get going. You need to start raising money now. But I had no infrastructure to do it. I came from the foundation, which has a team of 150. And so when I worked for the foundation, my one job was fundraising. It was great. Like I travel, see people, coffees, lunches, dinners, go golf occasionally, and get them, who invest in Iowa State. Then I moved to the collective, and all of a sudden, I was the only full-time person. I had no infrastructure as far as accounting, any of these things, software. So it was for the first couple weeks, it was like, okay, a deer in the headlights. But it's hard to believe that, less than 2 years later, and we have a great team, and I think we've been pretty successful in keeping Iowa State afloat. And it's not all because of the collective. It's all the people, and it's the Iowa State culture, and it's all the donors that have supported. It has really very little to do with me, but somebody had to at least put all the pieces together. And as someone told me, a couple months ago, it's like, you don't realize it, but you're basically a startup company, just like something else, but with no idea of what the direction will look like 5 years from now. I'm like, okay, that sounds about right. But I'm grateful for everybody that have invested and supported, and I think Iowa State's in a really good spot for now. But it's just hard to know where everything goes. But there was a lot of headaches along the way of, oh my gosh, what are we into here?
In those first few months, obviously, like you said, this was a very stark contrast from what you were used to in your professional life. How did you keep yourself, pushing? How do you push your creativity to take this? Like you said, it is a small business. It's like someone starting their own small business. How did you push yourself to, think creatively, like, okay, how do we grow this?
That was the hardest part, because there was a lot of things pushing against us. Number one was people just didn't agree with NIL. And I would say most people, when I talk to them still, even if they are supporting, are like, I don't like it.
Yeah.
Like, I understand. So people didn't like it. People didn't think Iowa State could compete in it. So they're almost like hands off from the start. And then we had no marketing. Nobody knew who the collective was, unless for the diehards that listen to this podcast,
Right.
or they're on the message boards or on Twitter. And so what I did right away was like, I have no marketing budget. I have zero. We had no money. The money we had needs to be spent on the players. I couldn't just go to, TV and radio and just blast a bunch of ads. There was no money. So, really what we did from the start was just lean into social media. And so I did. It was still dumb, but you can go look back at it now. When I started, it was the start of the state fair. And so at the time, we had donors from 12 of the 99 counties in Iowa when I started, just 12 of the 99. So I did a really dumb and silly state fair challenge where I said, okay, we're trying to get
I remember this.
Everybody from each county in Iowa to become a WeWill donor. And I grabbed one of my kids' like fake cows and grabbed a corn dog and put it on the internet. And that was the first real campaign of getting the word out. And then I picked on the Iowa fans, because that was my go-to. Was like, if any way to get attention is get into a Twitter beef with an Iowa fan. And I challenged Iowa State fans, like, are you going to let these Iowa fans talk down to us like this? And it was a motivation of, how do you get engagement to make people understand what's going on? And then a couple things really worked early, is that, I think people felt comfortable enough that I wasn't trying to, steal all the money or anything. And then the other thing that helped, the year didn't go great, but Iowa State beat Iowa. And so we, really tried to, gather some momentum from that football season. Iowa State started 3-0. But so is that part of it, but then also really highlighting the nonprofit side. And so we knew right away, like, if we want to get the word out and get people more comfortable with this, you have to show some impact, just like any other nonprofit. So very first day on the job, I went with Will McDonald to Food at First, which is a food kitchen in Ames. I think it's at the Methodist or the Lutheran church. But Will, like I mentioned earlier, Will had some offers to just leave Iowa State and go work out with an agency and get paid a bunch of money and just work out for the draft, essentially. And so he came to me when I started, like, hey, I don't want to go, but also I'd like my parents to be able to come to a couple games this year.
Yeah.
And so we had to find him an opportunity, like my first day on the job. So my first day on the job, I'm cold calling food banks and places like that, because we thought we would sack hunger with Will McDonald. I mean, kind of a cheesy idea, but So we had this person had no idea who Will McDonald was. We need help. It was a Thursday night. And so I went with Will McDonald to the food kitchen. Me and Will are in the back washing dishes and serving people. They liked Will more than me because he could reach the top shelf to get all the stuff down. And this gentleman came up to us who was, at this food shelter. He's like, he looked at Will and he goes, "Hey, you look like a basketball player. Do you play?" And Will goes, "No, I play football." And the guy goes, "Are you any good?" And Will said, "I'm okay." And it's like super humble. But Will and I were there for 4 hours, cleaning dishes, feeding people. And then he mopped the floors afterwards. And then we gave him, I think it was $5,000. And it was like our whole budget at the time.
Yeah.
But we then had Will film a video. We had some pictures. We sent out an email to some folks like, this is the impact we can have. So we continued to build on that. We had a free basketball camp that September with some at-risk youth down in Des Moines with the entire men's basketball team. And that got some really good attention, got some media, and just slowly kind of built. Meanwhile, in the background, our biggest fundraising is, just with those folks that can give those larger gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those folks start to get more comfortable of, all right, we trust what the collective's doing. We trust Brent. We trust the people that are in charge here. And then what really helped us out as well is Coach Campbell, Coach Otzelberger, Coach Fenley all advocated for us as well. And then Jamie Pollard, like, okay, yeah, this is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And so that first year it was a lot of just, I didn't know what we were doing, but trying to get the word out as quickly as we could to the masses. And that's really what it was. And now we've gone from, when I started, we had, I think, 110 donors. And now we've had over 7,000 donors to the collective in less than 2 years. So it has grown what we've needed to grow because it's the only way to stay competitive in this world. But yeah, it was some interesting times. So thank goodness for Twitter, Hawkeye fans, and a good rivalry here or there. And Brian Ferentz too. I made a lot of fun of Brian Ferentz, and that raised some money
How
too.
could we forget?
Yes, that raised some money.
What was it like for you finding a way to make people care about this without them knowing what it was? Like, what was that experience like from a business standpoint?
That was the hardest part is, okay, how do you, I was used to, when I worked for the College of Business, everyone got it. It was,
Mm-hmm.
no, we need to raise money to help students get scholarships, help faculty do more research. A big part of my fundraising job was fundraising for a new building.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, fundraising for an expansion of the Jardine building was 10 times as easy as fundraising for NIL when 90% of the people were against it.
Yeah.
And so it was just a matter of finding connections and then using those people who do understand it to reach out to their friends. And we had to do it really with we didn't have an email list. We didn't have a donor database because keep in mind at this point, the collective and the university had to be very, very hands off. They couldn't help really with anything.
Mm-hmm.
They still can't give me data. I know a lot of people think, hey, why don't you just get the season ticket database? It's not that easy because the foundation has rules of how they give out their Cyclone Club data and things like that.
Yeah.
So it was really a lot of word of mouth, a lot of lunches, a lot of coffees, a lot of happy hours with, donors that could help. And then using the donors we did have to connect with some of their friends. And so, that first year, our goal was to raise literally $200,000. And we didn't think we could get there. But by January of 2023, we had raised $700,000. And we thought, oh, we're figuring this stuff out. Little did we know that basketball portal off season, the prices just got completely out of control. So we went from in the spring of 2023 from, okay, we feel like we're doing okay to, oh my gosh, one player, Hunter Dickinson, just went more for what our entire budget is for all of our sports. Yeah. And that was a wake up call at that point of whatever we're doing is fine. It's not enough. And so we need to keep on going. And that's where, some of the more marketing aspects came in and the branded beverages as well.
When you guys started to see, those schools that have an abundance of money, which is insanity, how did you decide what was that next step for you guys? Like you said, you start having the beers, you start, the pizzas, you have the merch line. Like, where does that innovation come from? How do you look at people that have millions, those collectives, and think, all right, so what's going to work for Iowa State? What's going to work for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. We just don't have. I mean, a lot of these. Just give an example. The Texas Tech Collective. They got started by 5 guys who each sold a part of an oil company, and had literally tens of millions of dollars overnight that they could just here you go. And so they got a lot of attention. They really threw the first salvo in the Big 12, because when they announced, this would have been, I think, fall of 22 or maybe spring of 23, that they were going to pay every single athlete, men's, women's basketball player, and football player, $25,000. And the college athletics world went, oh my gosh, how or what? That adds up to, it was like 2.6 million. How are they going to do? I had the same thought. I'm like, we're at a couple $100,000, and they're doing like, this is Texas Tech. This is not Ohio State. This is not A&M. Little do we know now, that would be laughed at now if everyone was only getting $25,000.
Right.
I mean, that's how much it has changed. So that it basically came down to, Jackie, of we just needed more, and we needed to find ways to, what will Iowa State fans respond to? And so that's, where our biggest effort was, the masses. We know we don't have 5 guys that just sold an oil company, but we do have a lot of people that love Iowa State. And Iowa State's separation in this whole college athletics world is people care. And so if you can reach them and let them know how important it is, and let them know, hey, your $10 a month really does matter, and do the math. If we have 7,000 of you giving $10 a month, like, it's easy to add up. But then also, so that was kind of the mass marketing. That's where the Ames Lager came in. And then after that, the pizzas and the merch, the golf balls, that all helps. But it helps not only from the revenue standpoint, but the biggest thing that Ames Lager did for us, and that was the biggest one, was it just got the word out instantly over what the collective is doing. And I have to give kudos to Iowa. I mean, let's be honest. They had the Swarm beer before we had Ames Lager. And so this was about a year ago today. And, it was day one of the NBA Finals. I remember it. And I'm calling all of these breweries across the state, the bigger ones. And they all said, no, we're not interested, because we don't want to upset the Iowa fans.
Yeah.
Thankfully, there was one that said, hey, we'll talk. And it was our friends at West O. And then that announcement that we were going to do Ames Lager, it got literally millions of impressions online. It made the Wetzel and 40 podcast. It just became viral. And so that was great for us, because one, sure, it got the word out in anticipation for the Ames Lager, but 2, it just got the word out about the collective. And then that was the biggest thing, in my opinion, of Iowa State fans saying, hey, this is actually kind of fun. We can get behind this. This isn't the end of the world. I can buy a beer, and I feel okay about that. I don't have to give $100,000. And so that was the public-facing piece. But then in the background, where we really made our biggest impact was getting some of those larger boosters, investors, to understand that this is needed and it's important to jump on. And so, we had great partnerships with, some of the main donors to Iowa State, who are also helping us out. But what those folks wanted was to see the grassroots impact as well. And you can't have one without the other. And that's why, I think it's worked, is we've been able to get the grassroots stuff through the beer and the pizza, but then also, you still need those high dollar donors to really keep the thing moving. So it was 2-pronged of the fundraising, which the big called major gift fundraising, which was my background. But then also the social media fundraising through, the pizza, the beer. And then what really helped too was the Cyclone Larry Challenge. I don't know if you remember this, but when we announced the Ames Lager, it went nuts that Cyclone Larry literally helped us announce that. We got millions of views thanks to Cyclone Larry. So we had a Cyclone Larry challenge of donate $6.90 to the collective, and we can buy a lifetime supply for Cyclone Larry. And that got a bunch of attention. That went nuts, and that raised a bunch of money. I mean, it raised like $25,000. I didn't give Larry all of it. But no, it's just little things here and there that eventually got the word out. And then the third prong of this whole thing, and I'm talking a lot here, Jacqueline, I apologize.
No, you're good.
Was, in order to get the word out to the masses, we actually had to sign a sponsorship agreement with Iowa State's multimedia rights partner, which is Learfield.
Mm-hmm.
And so we pay Learfield a yearly fee to advertise in Jack Trice Stadium, to advertise on the Cyclone Athletics Twitter account, Facebook account, Instagram account. So we pay them. That is our marketing that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And that has really helped get the word out. And as part of that agreement, Jamie Pollard was able to send out an email on behalf of us to all the season ticket holders through that relationship with Learfield. And so we had a huge matching challenge last August
Mm-hmm.
that raised over $1 million thanks to Jamie's email as part of that campaign. So that was kind of our next big step up. We spent a decent amount of money to get that marketing out there, but it more than paid itself back with the amount of new donors and new contributors we got from that effort. And but it's constant. And because we went through the portal this year and realized we're still way behind some of our peers. And so there's never, I get a lot of bad ideas in my email inbox, and some really good ones too. And we're always looking for the next best opportunity without just making donors so fatigued of, oh, you're asking me for something else now too.
How do you keep yourself encouraged? Like, how do you stay so positive? Like, on your Friday podcast, you were talking about how you felt maybe too optimistic, but how do you stay optimistic when you see what your peers are doing?
Yeah, I just think for me, I mean, I love what I get to do. Like, outside of my kids and my wife, this is what I love Iowa State, and I want Iowa State to do well. So there's times I'm banging my head against the wall. I'm going, but you know what? If we don't do this now, then what's going to happen? And what, I grew up going to games. What is this 5 and a 6-year-old when they're my age? What happens if Iowa State isn't competitive in athletics anymore? What happens to this whole area? And that's kind of I know it's a little bit big picture, but that's part of it. And then, but more than anything, I call them kids now, but the players are awesome. Like the stories that I wish we could share of some of the stuff that they've done with their NIL is just so cool, and they're so appreciative. And anytime it's been a headache of a day, you'll get a text from a Rocco Becht or a Conrad Hawley or a Taman Lipsey, or even one of my favorites is J.R. Singleton. So J.R. Singleton is an incredible individual. So J.R. Grew up in the Chicago area, but he used some of his NIL, to pay for his parents' mortgage and got them out of debt with some of the NIL he got. He literally got them an upgrade for their house. And the thing about JR is, we gave him a little bit to volunteer at a couple places or community engagement. He then now is going weekly on his own to Boys and Girls Club. He's Mr. Singleton to the kids. Like, he just goes on his own now. And those are the type of things that really, if people would know the quality of people that are in the football, basketball, and now we work a little bit with volleyball programs, it's hard not to get excited to keep pushing, because it ultimately does help them. And I know obviously it helps Iowa State be competitive, but it has really helped some of these young folks get out of really bad situations too. There's one football player, and I won't name his name, but he didn't come from much. But this past year, he opened up a Roth IRA, and he's stockpiling all of his NIL earnings just to make his family better off down the road. And those are the really cool things that NIL can bring. It's not, at Iowa State, we're not talking about guys with, just reckless spending, and most aren't getting huge numbers that you hear about in the media. But those that are doing, some are doing really well now. I'm gonna be honest, like, they're doing well, but they're taking care of others in the process. And that's the really neat part. I mean, I could tell you a bunch of stories on Rocco Becht and what he's doing. There's going to be stuff that's going to come out about some of the things he's got going on this summer that is really, really neat, that I'm excited to share with everybody. But I haven't met an ungrateful Cyclone. Yeah. And that's what really keeps you going is, gosh, this is really making an impact for them. And then they make an impact for us. And, now when my 4-year-old goes and see Miles Purchase, it's like his best buddy. And it's just really neat that we're trying to make those connections with what they're doing. They're getting paid to do it, but the more they can be engaged in this area, the less likely it is that they're going to leave. And I think there's just really neat connections that can be made with that.
I feel like those stories are kind of the disconnect that you see when people are questioning, like, well, why aren't Iowa State players leaving? And of
Yeah.
course, Iowa and Iowa State love to argue, right? And so the NIL conversation is one of those. And you see Iowa go through some situations. I mean, what's his name? The player that left to Alabama.
Yeah, Proctor.
Yes.
Yep.
You know, I feel like no one is taking the time to tell the stories that you have, because I've heard several from you at events, and I'm sure many of our listeners have also heard you share them. And I feel like that's the one thing we're missing in NIL is like the humanization side of it, of like what this actually means for people.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be fun in the next couple of years when more of those impact stories will come out of, hey, what did you actually do with this? You know, like Ariana Jackson didn't get a lot from us, but she then used her NIL dollars to buy season tickets for kids with disabilities at Roosevelt High School to get season tickets to watch her play. She didn't have to do that, but she's a great person, and there's so many neat things like that where it's not all just you know, buying whatever you want and all this stuff. It really, and it makes the thing for me is, and then also now that Crystal, my wife's involved with a lot of the daily basis, now you want Iowa State to do well, because obviously the more Iowa State does well, it's easier to raise money, and it's good for business.
Winning is good.
But you also, like, you really grow to know and like the athletes as well. And I think that part of college athletics, I hope will never change, is I don't want it to get so professional where you lose that these are still 18 to 22-year-olds that are growing up.
Right.
And so you getting to know them, and, you know, getting to know some of their families and all of those things makes it really fun, because then when they have success on the court or on the field, it's like, that's not just, oh, that's Curtis Jones, the basketball player that I watched. I'm a Hilton. It's like, no, that's Curtis, and I've gotten to know some of his family, and like, he's a really neat guy, and, you know, wish him well. And even, you know, I don't do this a lot, but I was texting with Keyshawn Gilbert after he had the dunk against, I think it was South Dakota State.
Yeah.
And I sent him a photo. I was like, hey man, that's pretty good. He's like, yeah, I can get up a little bit. So it's just fun you get to know these guys a little bit outside, and hopefully be a positive experience for them. Because again, we cannot oftentimes match financially, but if we can make their time with the collective in the community and all things Iowa State be a really fun and good thing, and know that they can trust me, that's my biggest priority over donors, over anything. Is I want to make sure if I get a text or a message or a call from a player or a player's family, take care of them first and foremost, because that's ultimately why we exist.
What are some of your favorite stories that you've had with athletes? Not so much about their stories or in background, just like experience on the job. What's been some of those highlight moments with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. I mean, TJ Tampa is one of my favorites. Again, quiet kid, really quiet kid, but he had literally hundreds of thousands of reasons to leave Iowa State, and he didn't. This was in the heat of it. You know, this was December of 23, and we didn't have much. And I was upfront with him and his family. I mean, TJ, if you want to take the money, I mean, we just don't have it. But he's like, no, we're good. All I ask is that can my family come to every game this year? That's all he wanted. Like, yeah, we could figure that out in the budget if you want to do that. And then running into his parents at the Cincinnati game last year, and they were so thankful I was like, no, I'm thankful for TJ for staying here when he had a lot of reasons to leave and things like that. But then, you know, some of the nonprofit things of raising over $150,000 for Make-A-Wish for their charity softball game. We're going to do another one in June at Southeast Polk High School. Look forward to seeing people there.
Nice.
And just some of the neat things, life-changing things for some of these folks. Audie Crooks going from, you know, Algona Garrigan to now, you know, it was all her, but just helping her through some of these NIL deals, to now she's a superstar. And now she just hired a pretty high-end person that's going to get her even more endorsements. But seeing her grow, and you get to know them, and you appreciate where they came from, but then also where they're going as well. But then it's, you know, a Gabe Kalsher who will just text me randomly and say, hey, just checking in to say hi. Or, you know, keeping in touch with a Niang or a Halliburton who just want to help. And that's the fun part too, is one of my favorite parts has been connecting the past players who didn't get any NIL, who still want to support the current guys because they love this place.
Yeah.
And they want to help. And that's that's being neat, being a part of those things.
It's the culture of Iowa State,
It
right?
is. I mean, that's the only way we're going to make it, is if
Yeah.
we're all kind of going the same direction. And I can't tell you enough about people like what Purdy has done with Halliburton, Yang, and they could, we're just a collective here, and like
Yeah.
they don't need to be a part of it, but they want to be because they want to help.
Mhm.
And it's just that's been the neat part, is current players, but then also bridging some of that divide between past guys and current guys. So we're going to do a golf outing with football alumni in June.
Nice.
But we're going to have a lot of the current guys there too. So it's those connections. And then again, what do I keep coming back to it, is the more connections we can make for the current players with whatever, with the community, youth, former players, coaches, boosters, the more hopefully they build those bonds, and it makes it harder to leave. And then that's always the goal.
So through the changes that have been discussed, and like you said last week, it's going to be a long road of figuring out what the new normal is going to look like. You said that you feel Iowa State's in a good spot. Why is Iowa State in a good spot?
I think it's because you've got good people that are figuring this out together. And this isn't, you're going to see across the country, you're going to see a lot of collectives fighting their administration over what to do going forward, because the collectives, they want to continue to exist, because there's some of these collectives have 6, 7 full-time employees. We have 1.5. I mean, we're super small for a reason, because we need to spend as much money as we can on the athletes. So you're going to see these battles of collectives saying, we don't want to go away, and administrators saying, no, you need to come in-house, because we don't have money to do both. And so that ability to stick together, having the relationships between coaches, administrators, the NIL operation, it's all going to be important, because there's going to be a lot of tough conversations that everyone's going to have here in the next couple of months of how do you allocate money, who gets what, who decides it, and who do you keep asking booster wise? Because if I'm a big donor and I'm a booster, I don't want to be asked by 5 different people to keep giving. And so the more you can consolidate it, in my opinion, the better. So those schools that are well positioned, that have, one vision going forward, will be a lot more successful. And I'm going to tell you guys, there's going to be a lot of drama between collectives telling athletes to not do this or that with the school, and school say, no, you need to. And then, will conferences all have similar agreements? And there's a lot of headaches to go. Last week was just kind of a starting spot. But the more groups that can stay nimble, efficient, and get along, I think those schools will be better off. And I feel really good about Iowa State, with obviously Jamie Pollard at the top, but then the coaches are the real deal, all of them.
Yeah.
And I think they're all going to understand that, we have to do this, as Bill Fenley would say, the Iowa State way. And that's, you're going to have to be as efficient as you can. You're not going to have the most resources. So be really, really strategic and smart about how you approach things.
What's been the biggest learning experience for you through this all? Like, I know you had the background in fundraising, so that obviously was something you were comfortable in. You knew how to do that. You'd been doing it. What's the biggest takeaway for you, even just professionally?
Yeah, I think just, having to make a lot of decisions every day. I love just talking to people and raising money. Like, I'll do that. I'll talk to people about Iowa State athletics. I'll talk to you. What I wasn't good at was running a QuickBooks system or sending donation receipts and automating all these tasks that going to the bank and post office every day. I mean, I have to do that every day. It's all of those tasks where if you work with a big organization, in a well-run organization, you don't even think about.
Right.
But, expense reports and filing taxes and doing all these things. And what I've had the great pleasure of doing is I'm the one who is compensating the players every day. So literally every month I have to go in and pay them, but then make sure that they do their taxes. So most of my spring, a good portion of my spring, was spent talking to athletes, parents, financial people, of making sure they had all their tax forms and they had all this and things. Like, I never in my wildest thought would I be talking to a wide receiver's parent about that he needs to get his tax information and all these things. But again, if you don't do that, if you don't provide customer service to the player, then maybe that's where I keep coming back to. That was always my first priority, is take care of the players first and foremost and make sure they're doing okay. Because that's the last thing I wanted, was to then be upset with the collective and thus upset with Iowa State and gives them a reason why they're unhappy and looking to leave. So the most we can make that, as easy as possible for them, the better. But yes, all the accounting, all of that stuff. It was a good crash course of, oh my gosh, yeah, this people actually have to go into QuickBooks every day and check all the transactions and make sure everything's okay. So putting the CFO hat on was interesting.
It's funny the parallels I hear you saying, just like when C-Dub talks about, growing CF and how he suddenly was doing things he'd never thought of because all he thought he was going to do was write. And jokes on him, he's answering my tax questions. So
well, that's what I thought. Oh, I'm just gonna call people. I'm gonna raise some money, and then I go, wait a second. Well, how does the money get there? Like you have to set up all of these systems in place. So these are big donors and big companies. A lot of times that they expect a certain level of stewardship. And at first I was like, I'm not doing great at this, but thankfully the systems are now largely in place. But that was when we started. We had nothing. We had none of that. It was literally, my email and my Twitter, and it's just like, what do we do from here? So, but yeah, it's grown quite a bit, and grateful that it's helped Iowa State in this kind of interesting time. But what I would tell people is, it's still going to be interesting for a while. So it's not like we're out of the woods yet, but I do think that because of everyone's continued support, we'd able to weather what I would say is the worst part of the storm with still some to go.
Yeah. How much fun has it been? The social media aspect. I mean, not only are you good at the fundraising part of it as much as we, can sit and laugh about it, but I mean, how much fun is it getting to pick fights with Iowa fans and just like all the memes and how much, crap you get from people? How much fun is that part of your job?
It is to an extent. I mean, sometimes it gets points like, I hope people realize I'm mostly not being serious, because I've had some interesting messages and calls of people that were legitimately like, it's not like assault or anything, but it's like, okay, we're just, chill out a little bit here. But realizing that, the reason to do that is that got engagement right off the top. So I've kind of leaned away from that now. Now, occasionally an Iowa fan will start chirping, and I like to remind them of how they're wrong, clearly. But no, I've hopefully grown up a little bit. A lot of times my wife, Chris, will be like, hey, you don't need to do that anymore. But sometimes I can't help myself. But no, it's fun. I mean, what I love about Iowa State is the interaction with the people. And so the best part about this, just like at the George Strait concert this past weekend, ran into probably 20 people just around the lots and on the concourse that I didn't know that. I've never met them before, but I knew them through social media. And being able to meet them and feel like we're friends just because I know them through this or that, it's pretty cool. And that's what makes this place so special.
So closing it out, I'll ask you one final question. What's something that maybe people don't know about the collective, if we haven't touched on it yet, that you would like people to know?
Really good. I would say we're still really bare bones grassroots. I mean, at the end of the day, we are as conscious and cognizant of using your dollar to the maximum as possible. So some collectives out there, they're taking 30% for themselves for operations and salaries and all those things. We are not right now. We're at 94.8% of every dollar that comes through the Iowa State NIL operation is going to the players. So even those deals that we've helped with like the purchase more ham and bacon and some of the stuff that Audie's gotten, that is all, we're not taking any of that. That's all going to them. So I hope Iowa State fans can rest assured that we are absolutely being as wise as we can with their dollar. We don't have an office. I work from my basement. There's no extra frills. And if you're bored, Google the Nebraska collective offices. They literally bought like $1 million, and it's just like, what? But why? I mean, ultimately, where is this going? So, I just hope people realize that we do appreciate what they've done. Us asking for more isn't because it isn't to get anybody on our side, Rich. It's just to keep up. And I hope they know how grateful we are. And what I would also say too is I'm super grateful for those that took a chance on me and then our board in general. So, we have those people I mentioned. We added Brooke Johnson and Steph Copley to our board, but then so many other donors that I've met along the way that just want to help. They just like, what can I do to help? And so many great volunteers that don't get anything from it other than They just want to be helped. They want to help and be kind. And that's been my favorite part is there's so many people who are pulling together. And you guys, honestly, it makes my day when you tweet at me that you bought a WeWill pizza and Ames lager, or, now we got the jerky, and we might be coming out with a WeWill hot dog coming up this fall. There might, so there's all this stuff, but it just makes me happy to know that everybody's in this together and for the right reasons. And I hope people trust that we are very appreciative and doing right by them for what we're doing. And then also grateful for the players, the coaches, the administrators. I mean, this whole thing would not work unless everyone's going the same direction. And even, I'm not going to give him a whole lot of credit, but even Chris Williams occasionally has been super helpful. And, without Fanatic, this would have been really hard. And that's the one thing that this ties all together is the platform that Williams gives me on a weekly basis. It's not lost on me of what we're doing to try and get the word out. And that has been, I don't know how we would have survived without it, because it was the best way to get the word out to as many people as possible was through Fanatic. And it's kind of neat how this all comes together with how Fanatic has grown to, we knew that if we were going to be successful, Fanatic had to be a part of it. And it just happens that I have to deal with Williams on a daily basis too.
And it just so happens that people are listening to you guys.
Yeah. Well, that's the fun part is it all can be connected. And I think ultimately with Chris looks at it, the way I look at it is we want Iowa State to be successful. Number one, because it's more fun when they're successful, but two, because we love the place and we love the people. And so the more those people can be successful, the happier we are. And, I know Chris sometimes gets some grief that, some of the stuff he does, but the guy at his heart loves the people that are supportive of him, but then also just really loves Iowa State and the people involved. And that's what really has kept this thing going.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you joining me on my pod.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you to I'm telling you, the Ivy College of Business, the Iowa State Foundation. I know they're advertisers, but though I give them a lot of credit too. Without that conversation I had with Dean Spalding, I would not have taken this. So Dean Spalding is retiring, so I can tell this story now. So I got approached by Ryan Harklaw and Jason Luch to kind of take the reins of the collective. And I went to Spalding and I said, hey, Dean, got this opportunity. I'm not really sure. There's not really any benefits by it. Wife's a little uncomfortable. But David said, and I still remember this conversation to this day. We went and had lunch. He's like, hey, Brent, for the good of Iowa State University, you need to go do that.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about it, I think that was just like a little bit dramatic, but he said, no, we need athletics to be successful, for this university to be successful. And he's like, I trust you can take on that challenge, and I'm always here to help. And so I leaned on Dean Spalding and my colleagues at the foundation throughout this whole process. And that's been the great part is everybody has been supportive, even though technically we're in a little bit of competition for dollars to an extent. They all know how this has helped Iowa State in the long run. So I am forever indebted to Dean Spalding, and hopefully he'll remain a close friend to this day.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's awesome how it's all webbed together, right? I'd be curious to see if that's the case at other places. It doesn't feel like it, but we might be siloed in Ames. So who knows?
Ames is unique for some interesting reasons, but also some really good reasons. And it's the reason why Campbell's still here, Fenley's still here, Jamie's still here is, I've worked at some other places, and it's the people that make the place. And that is absolutely the case in Ames. And the people, also the fans, all the people that listen to the podcast, all this stuff, it's all connected. And again, nothing makes me happier than when people tweet at me or come stop and say hello. And it's just a really neat deal.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jackie.
Well, thank you, Bloom. As always, guys, thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back in a few weeks.